When it comes to cyber warfare, we have more to lose than any other nation on Earth. When you look at the problem of the US prioritizing offense over defense, imagine you have two bank vaults, the United States bank vault and the Bank of China. But the US bank vault is completely full. It goes all the way up to the sky. And the Chinese bank vault or the Russian bank vault or the African bank vault or whoever the adversary of the day is, theirs is only half full or a quarter full or a tenth full. But the US wants to get into their bank vault, so what they do is they build back doors into every bank vault in the world. But the problem is their vault, the US bank vault, has the same back door. So while we're sneaking over to China and taking things out of their vault, they're also sneaking over to the United States and taking things out of our vault. And the problem is because our vault is full, we have so much more to lose. So in relative terms, we gain much less from breaking into the vaults of others than we do from having others break into our vaults. That's why it's much more important for us to be able to defend against foreign attacks than it is to be able to launch successful attacks against foreign adversaries. I think the public still isn't aware of the frequency with which sort of these cyber attacks, as they're being called in the press, are being used by governments around the world, not just the US. But it is important to highlight that we really started this trend in many ways. And this is happening across the world nowadays, where they realize that they're caught out, they're vulnerable, they have no sort of capacity to retaliate to any sort of cyber campaign brought against them. Now, this is something that people don't understand fully about cyber attacks, which is that the majority of them are disruptive, but not necessarily destructive. One of the key differentiators with our level of sophistication and nation-level actors is they're increasingly pursuing the capability to launch destructive cyber attacks, as opposed to the disruptive kinds that you normally see online through protesters, through activists, denial of service attacks, and so on. And this is a pivot that is going to be very difficult for us to navigate. The problem is the internet is the most complex system that humans have ever invented. And with every internet-enabled operation that we've seen so far, all of these offensive, operations, we see knock-on effects. We see unintended consequences. We see emergent behavior where when we put the little evil virus in the big pool of all our private lives, all of our private systems around the internet, it tends to escape and go Jurassic Park on us. And as of yet, we've found no way to prevent that. And given the complexity of these systems, it's very likely that we never will.
We have to think about where we came from, and we have to think about how it is that we got here, whatever here is. And I think when we look in the early half of the last century, particularly for students, anybody who's interested in science, in engineering, in law, in literature, this was a structural change in the way our society worked and our understanding of the physical laws of the universe. Scientists and engineers, particularly our technological elite, if you will, became absolutely intoxicated by the rapid advances that we were seeing in that day. The developing field of nuclear physics in particular just lit a spark in the imagination of a generation. It promised the potential of clean and cheap energy to just completely revise our understanding of what was possible and how we could even heal people, our work in medicine. But our utopian vision for the future is never guaranteed to be realized. And it was not long until the work of the greatest minds of this generation reached what I call the atomic moment, which is somewhat different from what physicists consider the atomic moment. This is where this generation corrupted, or rather those in power at the head of this generation corrupted our knowledge, our science, our findings, our tools to toward a military purpose. Today, we're seeing the atomic moment of computer science. Once again, our world is changing, but the difference is that this time, it's happening more quickly, and it's happening more fully. This is not a revolution merely in energy. We're in the midst of the greatest redistribution of power since the Industrial Revolution. And this is happening because technology has provided a new capability that's related to influence, that reaches everyone in every place. It has no regard for borders. Its reach is unlimited, if you will, but its safeguards are not. Now, this technology allows these institutions to monitor and record the private activities of people on a scale that's broad enough that we can say it's close to all-powerful. And it's through the use of new platforms and algorithms that are built on and around these capabilities that they're able to shift our behavior. In some cases, they're able to predict our decisions and also nudge them to different outcomes. And they do this by exploiting the human need for belonging. Right? We don't sign up for this. One of the common arguments is to say, oh, yeah, you said, okay, you understood what I was doing. But how many of you who have a Facebook account actually read the terms of service? Right? Like, it's not anything to be ashamed of. You have this for your phone, you have this for every website you sign up to, you have it for your bank, you have it for everything, everywhere, you have it for your university, you have it for access to their own information systems, you have it to get access to, the library. Everything has hundreds and hundreds of pages of legal jargon that we're not qualified to read and assess, and yet they're considered to be binding upon us. And it is through this sort of unholy connection of technology and sort of an unusual interpretation of contract law that these institutions have been able to transform this greatest virtue of humanity, which is this desire to interact and to connect and to cooperate and to share, to transform all of that into a weakness. And now these institutions, which are both commercial and governmental, have built upon that and built upon that, and they have structuralized it and entrenched it to where it has become now the most effective means of social control in the history of our species. Maybe you've heard about it, right? This is mass surveillance. When I came forward to reveal the first system of global, truly global mass surveillance back in 2013, which was being run not just by the United States government, but actually a real-life conspiracy, as hard as that is to believe. It's a real thing. It's in government documents. You can look at it online. Even the White House has refused to deny it, of a group called the Five Eyes. These are the Anglophone governments, which would be the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. And the revelation of this activity, which functioned, for those of you who don't recall, by working with companies, right? This was a collaboration between corporate and government power. And government in the United States, this began under the Bush administration and was embraced and extended by Obama, and it's continued to get worse under the current administration. They would go to the largest web platforms in our country and in your country and everywhere else. Each government would go to their own, and they would try to induce them into willful cooperation, in most cases beyond what the law required, by appealing to a sense of patriotism or a desire to increase public safety. And where that wouldn't work, in many other cases, coercion. Everything you've ever typed into Facebook, clicked on Facebook, every site you've ever gone to where you're logged into Facebook, but it just has that like button on the page, all of that was recorded, right? And it was poured into a system that didn't just touch internet connections, but it touched phone calls and everything else. And this is a global heat map of where the surveillance was happening most intensely, just from the US part of the operation. So unfortunately, this doesn't reflect Canada's numbers. But you see some unusual things here. You see stuff that wouldn't surprise you. You see the war zone is sort of red hot. And you see China is getting closer red. Red means more surveillance. Right? But an unusual thing is you would see a traditional adversary like Russia is actually less intensely monitored than the United States itself. You see Germany is being intensely surveilled, things like that, traditional allies. And this surprised a lot of people because we had constantly been told this was for our own good, it was for our own protection. And the only reason we weren't told about this was because if we knew, people would die. But when you actually looked at top secret documents, and all of these materials were classified before the days of 2013, their own documents written by their own lawyers said that the real reason these programs were classified was because they feared this is their own words, quote, damaging public debate. And that's about the scale of their activities, and that would open them up to legal challenges because they knew they had gone far beyond the law. Even by their own counting, the US National Security Agency, they're the ones in charge of sort of this mass surveillance operation internationally, and the FBI does a lot of the tapping domestically. By their own count, they were violating our laws thousands of times a year. I think 2,776 times
supernatural.
In a single quarter or calendar year. I can't recall precisely. And this just continued, and it spread, and it became more and more entrenched. And it was funny because people tried to speak against this internally. There was a man, a whistleblower prior to myself by the name of Thomas Drake. He was a senior executive. And he went inside the agency to his superiors. He went to the general counsel, the top lawyer of the NSA. He went to the inspector general, who's sort of the head of an investigatory watchdog agency that's supposed to keep the government in line. He even went to Congress and told them about these activities. And what happened? They didn't thank him. They didn't change the program. They didn't go, oh, yes, Mr. Drake, you're right. These programs go beyond what the law permits. They go beyond what the U.S. Constitution, our basic law, permits. The Fourth Amendment gives us freedom from unreasonable search and seizures without probable cause given by a police officer to a court, get a warrant stamped, all of these things. And instead, they just wanted to collect information about everyone, everywhere in advance, just in case they became interesting later.